Hey everybody, back with a new review, and I think you would have just seen the new little pre-roll thing I have for Rusto Meyer. Hopefully you enjoyed that. I'm going to try to use that going forward, just to kind of give my videos a little zhuzh. Anyway, today I'm coming back at you with another international horror movie. It is great. There's so many different voices, both women directors and just international directors making some really unique and interesting horror right now. A lot more than a lot of American directors, although obviously we have some greats coming out right now as well from America. So today I am bringing you a Indonesian movie. It is on Shudder once again, because Shudder is the only place really putting out super interesting international films. In general, they are doing an awesome job at it. So, what do we got with this movie? It's Impetigore. Now, might not mean much to you. It's directed by a director named Joko Anwar from Indonesia. He's directed several films, actually, but only two kind of notable horror movies. But the last two movies that he's put out have started getting him quite a bit of notoriety. So keep an eye out for Joko Anwar. This movie follows up Satan's Slaves, which was a kind of a breakout hit in the international horror scene a few years ago, also on Shudder, and kind of caught my eye after a little bit. I mean, the names kind of are hard to catch on to. I think that hurts him a little bit for American audiences. Satan's Slaves sounds so generic, but the movie was actually quite interesting and pretty good. This movie is similarly almost great, but has a few flaws. So, Impetigore, first of all, starts out with an awesome pre-title sequence, which I almost don't even want to describe to you, but it really does show the kind of level that this director can work on if he can get that consistency throughout the entire movie, similar to what this movie opens as. It'll be great. I'll give you the basic idea of it. I won't tell you exactly what happens. You have your main two characters that you kind of are introduced to right out of the gate. They both work as toll booth operators. So kind of like you get at almost like you see like a turnpike, where you have a toll booth. They come, they give you their toll, and then they go through to the next part of the highway. And it's late at night, and you've got your main character, who is Maya, played by Tara Basro. And she is one of the main stars of also Satan's Slave. So he seems to like working with her. She's really good, so it's a good reason to do so. So she's in one booth, and then her best friend, named Dini, played by Marissa Anita, is several booths away, so she can't see her. So like if you're looking at like a big wide, kind of a highway, there's tolls all the way along, and somewhere in one of the other tolls is her friend. So they talk by phone. They're having like a little voice conversation, and our main character Maya starts talking about how this creeper keeps showing up at her toll booth every night. And of course, while they're talking, he shows up, and I won't tell you what happens exactly, but it's a really cool sequence and really sets the scene. And then the basic plot is that based on that interaction, she discovers that she might know where she came from. So apparently she had been left by her parents when she was very, very young, so she really doesn't remember anything about it. And she gets to find out that she possibly has a family estate in this kind of remote village nearby. And even by Indonesian standards, which I'm not really familiar with Indonesian culture, but by Indonesian standards, they consider it a remote village, because they eventually have to take like a horse cart, kind of a taxi sort of a deal, to get out there, because it doesn't even have paved roads to get out to this village. So it's one of those movies, and I'm kind of a sucker for these kind of movies, strange, weird, isolated town kind of stories. Dead and Buried from the 80s is kind of one of those. To some degree, the original Wicker Man is one of those. The Cars That Ate Paris is one of them. I know I'm naming some pretty weird movies. But basically, any kind of thing where you're a stranger and you go into a little town where everyone is in on something and you're not sure what, and it has this kind of creepy, like, as everyone's watching you come through, kind of a deal. So you get that aspect. So her and her friend go there to see if her family estate is there and to figure out what happened to her when she was really little. And mostly to see if this big house that might have been owned by their family, if she can get it. So, that would be awesome. She'd have property or she could sell it. Kind of like finding a lost inheritance, I guess would be your idea there. So they get to the town, and of course, very quickly, strange things start happening, So, and I don't want to go too far into it other than to say there is a curse on this town. And there is slowly unveiling the possible relation to Maya and her being somehow responsible or blamed for this curse. So on the good side, there are some incredibly interesting visuals in this movie. And some sequences are super well done and super tense. You can tell that that this director has a great sense of kind of, just kind of pacing a scene and really kind of creating some interesting tension, really doing some interesting stuff visually. But narratively, this kind of goes up and down. There's some stuff that's really good, really creepy, and there's some pretty harsh gore later on. I know I'll kind of be spoiling some things, but even some stuff that might be kind of triggering for people. There's definitely some gore. I can't even really describe it without spoiling some things. Let's just say if you're squeamish or easily shocked, there will be some things that might bother you here. If you're kind of a casual horror moviegoer, you might not go here. But more hardened horror moviegoers aren't going to find anything like too crazy here. Like I said, on the good side, there's some really inventive stuff I've never seen. He definitely, in both this and Satan's Slaves, really incorporates aspects of Indonesian culture into the horror, which is super cool because anytime that a place is really imbued into a horror movie, you're kind of getting that double whammy of like a culture plus a cool horror movie. And that it kind of makes it, to me, more interesting, especially if you're not in that culture. You're seeing things constantly and finding things that are interesting to you kind of around the story as well. So that stuff is great. The actors, like I said, are great. Oh, there's one other main actor. That's Aryo Bayu, and he plays Aki Saptadi, and he's kind of like the de facto head dude in this town. He's famous for his shadow puppetry, and that's a big thing, big artist thing you'll see. You've probably seen some of it before, but if you haven't, it's something where they use like these kind of papery puppets, and they do shadow puppet shows. So that's kind of what he's known for, but he also comes across almost as like a shaman he's kind of somewhat of a spiritual leader or something to this town. You're not sure because you don't quite know the mystery early on. On the bad side, the plot definitely meanders a bit, and it will fall sometimes into tropey things. So for every great, original, and unique thing that happens where you're like, oh, I love this movie, there's another thing that's kind of tropey where, a ghost girl appears and you're like, okay, I've seen ghost girls before. Or maybe there's a certain sort of flashback occurs to help solve the mystery or help solve the mystery, and that's also kind of tropey. So I guess the bottom line is it's a near miss, not terrible. I would recommend this to horror fans, especially horror fans that are looking for more unique and interesting horror and possible future horror voices. You could get about a 3.5, 4 star out of this, I would say. For a more casual horror fan, this may not really strike you. So I would say it's a near miss of greatness and possibly a sign of great things to come from Joko Anwar. Let's keep our eyes out on him and see what else he does. All right, guys, I'll be back soon with another review, possibly Amulet. I think I'm going to be seeing Amulet next.